I remember exactly where I was standing when he called. In our kitchen. No, my kitchen. Chopping vegetables for a stew he would never eat. 34 years of marriage, and he couldn't even tell me to my face. The knife paused mid-slice when his name lit up my phone. I answered with the warm familiarity that had become second nature after 3 decades together. "Hello." There was a beat of silence, then a strange, smug tone I'd never heard before. "I've been thinking about this for a while now, and I'm just going to say it. I'm divorcing you." The carrots on the cutting board blurred as my vision narrowed, but I kept my voice steady. "Is that so?" He seemed disappointed by my calm. I heard him shift, clearing his throat before continuing with renewed confidence. "Yes, and you should know I've already sold the house. You'll be out by the end of the month." Then came the laugh. Not his usual warm chuckle, but something colder. The laugh of a man who believed he'd won before the game had even begun. The laugh of someone who thinks they've blindsided you completely. "Anything else?" I asked, my voice impossibly level. His pause told me he'd expected tears, begging. But I'd cried those tears months ago, alone in our walk-in closet after finding the hotel receipts, after seeing the text messages, after piecing together the elaborate tapestry of lies he'd been weaving while I maintained our life together. "Well, yeah. I've got a place lined up already, with her." "I see." I set the knife down gently. "Is that all?" "Jesus, aren't you going to say anything? 34 years, and that's your response?" I thought about the binder of documents in my home office, about the meeting with my attorney scheduled for tomorrow morning, a meeting I'd set up weeks ago, about the trust that now safely held my inheritance from my mother, about the deed to our home, transferred into my name alone 3 months earlier, when he'd been too distracted by his new romance to notice the paperwork I'd slid in among his regular business documents. "I think you've said enough for both of us. Goodbye." I hung up before he could respond, and stood perfectly still in the kitchen we'd remodeled together 5 years earlier. The kitchen where we'd hosted Thanksgiving dinners and birthday celebrations, where we'd laughed and argued and built a life I thought would last forever. He thought he'd caught me off guard. What he didn't know? I'd been waiting for this moment. Then I opened my phone and made a call of my own. "Patricia?" "It's me. He finally did it. Yes, just now. Exactly how we expected." I took a deep breath. "Let's move our meeting up to tonight if you can. I want to file first thing tomorrow morning." Patricia had been my attorney for 20 years. More importantly, she'd been through her own divorce after 30 years of marriage. When I'd walked into her office 6 months earlier with tears streaming down my face and a folder of evidence clutched in my shaking hands, she hadn't just offered legal advice, she'd offered a roadmap. I first suspected something was wrong last Christmas. He'd been distant, constantly checking his phone, disappearing for hours to run errands during family visits. But the moment I knew, really knew, came in February. I'd been looking for our passport information for an anniversary trip I was planning, as a surprise. 35 years deserved a celebration, I thought. Something special to reconnect us after the subtle drift I'd been feeling. In his desk drawer, beneath a stack of statements from an account I didn't recognize, I found a hotel receipt, the Westbrook downtown, Valentine's Day, a Tuesday when he'd told me he was at a business dinner. I sat on the floor of his office for nearly an hour, the receipt in my hand, wondering if there was an explanation that wouldn't shatter my world. A surprise he was planning? No. We'd spent Valentine's together at home. A colleague's room he'd paid for? Possible. but unlikely. I did something I'd never done in our marriage. I took his personal phone while he was in the shower and entered his password. Our anniversary date, ironically enough. And there they were. Messages going back months, photos, plans, a digital record of my husband falling in love with someone else while sleeping next to me every night. Her name was Vanessa. She worked in his office. She was 38, 22 years younger than me. Their messages were filled with complaints about me, about my boring routine, about how I wouldn't understand his need for excitement, about how they deserved each other. They'd been planning a future together since December, one that didn't include me. I returned to our bedroom just as the shower turned off, placed his phone exactly where it had been, kissed him goodbye as he left for work, and then I collapsed on our bedroom floor and let grief consume me completely. For 3 days, I could barely function. I called in sick to the community college where I taught literature part-time. I cried until my eyes were swollen shut. I stared at our wedding photos and wondered how 34 years could evaporate so completely. On the 4th day, I called my oldest friend, Margaret. "He's having an affair," I said when she answered. Margaret's response wasn't what I expected. "Before you do anything, before you confront him, I need you to come over, right now." At Margaret's kitchen table, over strong coffee and with tissues at the ready, she told me her own story. How her college sweetheart had left her after 28 years. How he'd drained their accounts, hidden assets, and left her struggling to keep her home. How the confrontation had given him time to prepare while she was still reeling emotionally. "The moment you let him know that you know, the clock starts," she said, taking my hands in hers. "And right now, you have the advantage. He thinks you're in the dark. Use that." That evening, Margaret connected me with Patricia, and the next morning, in a leather chair across from Patricia's imposing desk, I began to understand what needed to happen. "The biggest mistake women make," Patricia told me, "is moving from emotional discovery straight to emotional confrontation. You're hurt. You're angry. You want him to know it. I understand that completely. But right now, that hurt is your greatest vulnerability." She laid out a plan. Document everything. Protect my assets. Position myself legally before he even knew what was happening. And most importantly, give him enough rope to hang himself. "He's going to make mistakes," Patricia assured me. "They always do when they think they're the smartest person in the room." The next day, I opened my own bank account at a different bank. I transferred half of our joint savings, an amount I was legally entitled to, into it. Not enough to alert him, but enough to give me security. I made an appointment with a financial advisor Patricia recommended. Together, we created a trust for the inheritance I'd received when my mother passed 2 years earlier. Money I'd added to our joint investments because I never imagined needing to protect it from my husband. I began making copies of financial records, tax returns, investment statements, property documents. I created a timeline of his affair based on credit card statements, phone records, and the messages I'd seen. And each night I returned to our marriage as if nothing had changed. I made his favorite meals. I asked about his day. I kissed him goodnight and turned away, claiming menopause symptoms when he reached for more. The performance was exhausting. There were moments I almost broke, almost screamed the truth at him across our dinner table. But each time I remembered Patricia's words, "The clock starts the moment he knows." So I gave Oscar-worthy performances daily while methodically dismantling the financial trap he was setting for me. In March, I learned he'd been moving money into a separate account for months. Small amounts that wouldn't immediately raise flags. By April, I discovered he'd consulted with a divorce attorney. Ironically, someone Patricia knew well and considered sloppy. In May, I found the listing agreement. He'd met with a real estate agent to discuss selling our home. The home we'd built together. The home where we'd raised our children. The home that was now only in my name. That had been Patricia's masterstroke. She'd identified a loophole in our property arrangement that allowed me to transfer the deed without his signature due to an oversight when we'd refinanced years earlier. It was perfectly legal if rarely used. People don't check their property records, Patricia had explained. They assume everything stays as it was. He won't know until he tries to sell. And here he was, trying to sell a house that no longer belonged to him. June passed in a haze of preparation. I spent my days teaching summer courses and my evenings documenting his increasingly bold moves. The secret account grew. The meetings with his girlfriend became more frequent, less disguised. He began leaving his wedding ring in his bedside drawer. In July, I followed him one evening and watched as he toured a luxury condo downtown. Through Patricia's investigator, I learned he'd made an offer using a shell company. A shell company funded with money from our joint accounts. Again, I said nothing, just noted the address, the purchase price, the account the money had come from, and added it all to my growing file. By August, everything was in place. The trust was established. The house was securely in my name. I had documented every financial maneuver, every indiscretion, every lie. Patricia had prepared our filing down to the last detail. All we needed was for him to make the first move, which is exactly what he did with that phone call in our kitchen on a warm September evening. The morning after his call, while he was presumably celebrating what he thought was his clean getaway, I was sitting in Patricia's office as she submitted our divorce filing to the court. "We're first," she confirmed after receiving the electronic notification. "And we've requested an emergency injunction to freeze all accounts pending the initial hearing." I nodded, feeling strangely calm. "When will he know?" Patricia smiled the smile of a predator who has cornered her prey. "He'll be served at his office this afternoon. I requested their most theatrical process server." I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. By that evening, my phone was exploding with calls and messages. I let them go to voicemail, listening to his progression from confusion to anger to panic. "What the hell is this paperwork? Call me back immediately." "You filed for divorce? I already told you I'm divorcing you. Why are my cards being declined? What have you done?" And finally, his voice lowered to a desperate whisper. "Please, call me. Please. I think we need to talk." I texted him once, with Patricia's approval. "All communication should go through my attorney, Patricia Winters. Her contact information is in the filing you received." Then I silenced my phone, poured a glass of wine, and sat on my back porch, watching the sunset over the garden I would not have to leave. The temporary hearing was scheduled for the following week, 7 days during which he learned, piece by piece, just how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered. His attorney, a young man with an expensive suit and a reputation for aggressive tactics, requested an emergency release of funds, claiming I had vindictively and without cause frozen assets my husband needed for basic living expenses. The judge, a woman in her 60s with a no-nonsense reputation, reviewed our documentation of his secondary accounts, the money transfers, and the condo purchase. "It appears your client has access to sufficient funds in accounts established in his name alone," she noted dryly. "The temporary freeze on joint assets will remain in place until full financial disclosure is complete. I watched him from across the courtroom, his face flushed with a combination of anger and embarrassment. He couldn't even look at me. His attorney then challenged my residency in our home, presenting the listing agreement and sale documents. Your Honor, my client has already arranged for the sale of the marital home. His wife has no legal right to block this transaction. Patricia simply presented the updated deed. Your Honor, as you can see, the property in question is solely in my client's name. It has been since May. Her husband cannot sell property he does not own. I will never forget the look on his face, the utter disbelief, the dawning horror as he realized that the documents he had signed, documents I had carefully explained away as related to estate planning, had transferred our home into my name alone. His attorney requested a recess to confer with his client. When they returned, there was a new strategy, painting me as deceptive, manipulative, claiming I had tricked him into signing away his property rights. The judge listened patiently before responding. The deed transfer appears to be properly executed and notarized. Your client's signature is verified. If he signed legal documents without understanding their implications, that is unfortunate but not grounds for invalidation. And just like that, his victory parade turned into a legal funeral. By the end of that first hearing, the temporary orders were clear. I would remain in the house. All joint accounts would stay frozen pending full financial disclosure. And his request for temporary spousal support, a particularly audacious move given the circumstances, was denied. As we prepared to leave, I heard his attorney whisper, "You didn't tell me about the house. What else don't I know?" The full divorce proceedings stretched over 3 months. 3 months of discoveries and depositions. 3 months during which every financial deception, every carefully hidden asset, every detail of his affair was dragged into the light. During his deposition, Patricia was merciless, methodical, presenting evidence of each secret account, each hidden transaction. The timeline of his relationship with Vanessa laid out in hotel receipts, gift purchases, and text messages recovered through legal discovery. And this payment of $125,000 from your joint investment account? Patricia asked, sliding a document across the table. Can you explain the purpose of this wire transfer? He glanced at his attorney, who nodded slightly. It was an investment opportunity. An investment in what, specifically? He shifted in his seat. A real estate opportunity. Patricia smiled. Would this opportunity happen to be a luxury condominium at the Westbrook Towers, Unit 1402? His face drained of color. Let the record show, Patricia continued, that the funds used for this purchase came from joint marital assets, were transferred without my client's knowledge or consent, and were used to purchase property titled under a corporate entity wholly owned by the respondent. By the time she finished that day's questioning, he looked physically ill. Outside the conference room, Patricia squeezed my hand. He's realizing he's not just losing a marriage. He's facing potential financial misconduct charges if he doesn't agree to our terms. The settlement conference was scheduled for December, almost exactly a year after I'd first noticed the signs of his affair. A year that had transformed me from a trusting wife to a woman who understood exactly how to protect herself. His attorney had been sending increasingly reasonable offers, each one closer to what Patricia had advised we should accept. But there was one asset still in contention, the condo. He's arguing that since it was purchased in the corporation's name, it should remain his separate property, Patricia explained. But we have the documentation showing the money came from your joint investments. I thought about it for a moment. What if we counter with something unexpected? My proposal was simple. I would agree to a slightly smaller percentage of his retirement accounts in exchange for full ownership of the condo. Patricia raised an eyebrow. You want the love nest? I want the asset he never thought I'd discover, I replied. The one place he thought would always be his. She smiled slowly. It's aggressive. It might work. In the settlement conference, seated across from the man I'd spent half my life with, I watched his face as Patricia presented our final terms. My client is willing to accept 65% of the joint retirement accounts rather than the 70% she is entitled to, given the duration of the marriage and her lower earning capacity, Patricia stated. In exchange, she wants full ownership of the Westbrook Towers property, Unit 1402, currently held by Horizon Investments, LLC. His attorney leaned over, whispering urgently. I watched my husband's face contort with disbelief, then anger, then resignation, as he realized this was the best offer he would get. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. Fine, whatever. Just get this over with. The divorce was finalized in January. 35 years of marriage dissolved in a judge's signature. He didn't attend the final hearing. His attorney handed over all the necessary documentation, including the transfer papers for the condo. As we left the courthouse, Patricia asked what I planned to do with the property. Rent it, I said, at market rate, to deserving tenants. She laughed. You're not who you were a year ago, are you? I thought about the woman I'd been before, trusting to the point of blindness, financially dependent in ways I hadn't recognized, defining myself through my marriage rather than within it. No, I agreed. I'm not. 3 weeks after the divorce was final, I received a text from an unknown number. This is Vanessa. Can we meet? There are things you should know. We met at a coffee shop downtown. She looked younger than in the photos I'd seen, and surprisingly nervous. He told me you were separated, she began without preamble. He said you'd agreed to divorce amicably, but were keeping it quiet until everything was settled. I said nothing, just sipped my coffee and waited. Then suddenly he said we had to move out of the condo, that you'd somehow taken it in the divorce. Her hands trembled slightly around her cup. He never told me it was purchased with your money. Joint funds, I corrected. And no, I imagine he wouldn't have mentioned that. She looked down. I left him last week, after I found out he's been seeing someone else. Someone from his gym. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. As she stood to leave, she hesitated. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just about us, but about how he treated you at the end. No one deserves that after 30 years. I watched her walk away. This woman who'd once been cast as my replacement, now just another person he'd deceived. The condo rented quickly to a lovely couple relocating for work. The proceeds, combined with my divorce settlement and teaching salary, gave me more financial security than I'd ever had. I still live in our family home. My home now. I've repainted the walls, colors he always vetoed, converted his office into a reading room filled with books he considered frivolous, planted a garden that blooms with flowers rather than the practical vegetables he preferred. Sometimes in quiet moments, I still grieve for what was lost. 34 years of shared history, the future I'd imagined, the partnership I thought would carry me into old age. But more often I feel something unexpected. Gratitude. Gratitude for Margaret's wisdom that February morning for Patricia's strategic brilliance, for the 6 months of painful secrecy that ultimately protected me from financial devastation. And yes, even gratitude for that phone call in my kitchen, when he revealed who he truly was, and accidentally gave me the power to protect myself. If you're watching this and seeing parallels to your own life, let me offer some hard-won wisdom. Financial independence isn't just about having your own income. It's about knowing exactly what you have, where it is, and how to protect it. No matter how long you've been married, maintain visibility over all accounts and assets. Keep copies of important documents somewhere safe and accessible only to you. Consider placing inherited assets in protected trusts. And if you suspect something isn't right, trust your instincts, but act strategically, not emotionally. The greatest power you have is the power they don't realize you possess. I rebuilt my life at 60, created financial security I control completely, found strength I never knew I had, and you can too, no matter your age or circumstances. If my story resonated with you, please share your experiences in the comments. Subscribe for more real-life accounts of financial resilience and personal reinvention. Because while my marriage ended, my story continues, stronger, wiser, and entirely on my own terms.